And we're live. All right, welcome back to the show. Once again, we are dealing with Kyle Kulinski. Um, and again, he has a horrible take on the death penalty. I'm joined by Deathwatch again. Deathwatch, you can introduce yourself, to those who haven't seen you before.
Thanks for having me. So I cover the death penalty on Twitter. My handle is at _death_watch. This is my third stream, I think, with Yu Suzuki. So I'm unfortunately very familiar with the idiocy of Kyle Kulinski when it comes to the death penalty. So I'm unfortunately used to it. I hate to say that because no one with a brain should be able to get used to this type of bullshit, but
no. And with Kyle, it's progressive.
It's progressively getting worse.
Yeah.
That's pretty much the most progressive thing about Kyle. His takes progressively get worse on the death penalty.
Oh, yeah, and this one is no different. In this one, he actually thinks more of Biden than I do. And you're about to see that.
Okay. Well, let's get started.
All right.
When Joe Biden was running for president, he said repeatedly that he's against the death penalty and that he's going to get rid of the death penalty at the federal level. I don't know how much influence Joe Biden would have when it comes to the death penalty at the state level. I know there are many red states that are very pro-death penalty, and perhaps his arsenal is limited in terms of fighting back against that. But definitely at the federal level, he can do something about it.
Okay, real quick. So yeah. I think in theory, Joe Biden could try some trick to halt state executions, but here's what would happen. If he somehow was able to find a way to fuck with state death penalties, states like Alabama or Arkansas or Arizona, Texas, Oklahoma, Florida, states that are aggressively, and I mean very aggressively, for the death penalty, their attorneys general would absolutely sue the ever-loving shit out of Biden, and they would win in court. It would delay executions because of the, back and forth, but they would ultimately prevail. So I think Biden won't even try to do that because he'd get his ass handed to him.
The most Biden can do is he can't even abolish the federal death penalty unilaterally. The one thing he can do is abolish the military death penalty, as far as I know, because that was reinstated by executive order under Reagan. And Biden, all he has to do is reverse that executive order. Now, I'm hoping that he doesn't realize that. And so in the unlikely event he comes across this stream, I'm sorry in advance. But he could commute death row, both federal and military. And
that's going to be a terrible decision.
Yeah, I hope he doesn't do it. And all I can say is I am less optimistic than Kyle is about that.
There's no doubt about it. And understand that it's supposed to be his Catholic views, his religiosity.
Oh, now you care about his religious views, Kyle, huh? Isn't your show called Secular Talk?
I think so. Yeah. That's weird. What's interesting is I love how, most people who are atheists or agnostic oppose the death penalty. I'm an atheist, but I'm fervently for the death penalty. But the interesting thing about these type of people is that they will be ardently for separation of church and state until it comes to an issue like the death penalty. Like with Amy Coney Barrett, you had a lot of the progressives who were saying that she was too Catholic or her religion was going to influence her views a lot, and that would obviously be a concern. But then when she greenlighted all of the remaining federal executions that she oversaw as a SCOTUS justice, they were all losing their shit about being like, oh, well, she's Catholic. Does she know that Pope Francis doesn't like the death penalty? It
doesn't matter.
They like secularism until it comes to issues like the death penalty, and then it's suddenly like, oh, you should follow your teachings. Like, pick a fucking side.
Yeah, well, it's because they're not honest to argue. They don't have an honest argument. They're just trying to. They're gaslighting. That's what it is.
that have led him to a conclusion on the death penalty that differs from what it is now. Namely, that it's immoral, it's unethical, it's not right, and human life is precious.
Unless you murder someone, unless you commit capital murder, in that case, you forfeit.
Yeah. So if you commit capital murder, you forfeit your right to life. I've said that before, and I stand by it. If you commit capital murder, your life no longer has any worth.
And that's your own fault for doing that, not
it's not the state's fault. It's not the state murdering you. It's you put yourself on that gurney. Every inmate who executed by the feds put themselves on that gurney, and they committed crimes well deserving of it.
Mm-hmm. And so, therefore, we should be against it as a matter of principle. Even if somebody does commit a horrific crime and they're a terrible person and there's no signs of rehabilitation, then it says something about society that you respond in kind.
Ooh.
Precisely,
I love
Kyle.
How they use that stupid argument. Yeah, it says something about us. Yeah, you know what it says when we carry out the death penalty on a murderer? It says, we won't tolerate this kind of behavior, and if you do this kind of thing, we are going to make sure you get the ultimate punishment for that. That is the kind of message that a civilized society should send when someone, let's say, murders multiple people.
Oh yeah, and I like this when the antis say this. They say, "Oh, it's not about them; it's about us."
It is about them. It's because
it is about us.
They decided to do this in the first place. They kick-started this whole process that started with a horrible murder or murders, and yeah, I think it's appropriate that we have the death penalty for certain crimes.
Yeah.
And what does it say that we have the death penalty? It says that if you do this kind of thing, we're not gonna put up with it.
Yeah,
I think
it says that
the way the seriousness of the crime of murder when you make the punishment less appropriate or reduce its severity.
Yeah, when they say the death penalty teaches us that killing is okay, it's like, actually, I think that if you reduce the punishment for murder, you're teaching society that murder is not that serious a crime.
Yeah.
If you want to uphold the fact that life is precious and that murder is a serious offense, you should punish its taking with the harshest penalty.
Exactly.
Oh, you murder people, so now we're going to murder you to show that murder is wrong?
Oh, he did the meme.
I really wish I had alcohol with me, because I would go through 857 liver transplants by the end of this video if I had alcohol with me.
That's that's also an amazing time to pause the video. I mean, just look at that expression. Yeah, Kyle is again misunderstanding the definition of murder. Murder is the unlawful taking of human life
without justification or excuse.
Yeah. Executions are not unlawful, and they're done for like a reason. We're not just killing people because we feel like it.
Yeah, it's not like we're just picking up someone off the street and just putting them on the gurney. Like, no.
Yes. I'm bored. Let's get that guy off the street. Put him on the gurney.
I mean, you guys know my thing on violence. I believe the only time it's okay is for imminent self-defense. That's the only time I can think of a moral justification to use violence. But this truly isn't that. The death penalty truly isn't that, because there is no current threat. The threat is neutralized.
Kyle, that's where you're wrong, buddy. That's where you're wrong.
Kyle's extremely wrong there.
7 inmates on federal death row, and I think 9 of them committed their crimes while they were already in prison. In other words, they were serving either a prior sentence for murder, or they were like serving like a sentence for another crime, and then they fucking murdered other inmates.
Yeah, a lot of them. And yeah, the prison by no means removes the ability of inmates to continue ordering murders. You have people like Mark Hopkinson, you have people like Clarence Ray Allen, Caboni Savage.
You have people like Shannon Govsky. You have people like Joseph Ebron. And a lot of the inmates who were already serving sentences in federal prison who then decided to commit murder, a lot of them are affiliated with gangs like the Aryan Brotherhood.
Yeah, MS-13.
Prison gangs. And in the Aryan Brotherhood in particular, they are primarily based in prisons, and they have a track record of ordering hits, even in the most secure prisons. In fact, they ordered the murder of a Colorado prison superintendent a few years ago. That murder was kickstarted from inside prison, and then they had someone go hunt the DOC superintendent down and murder him.
This was Tom Clements.
Yeah.
But there's something there's something on your end causing a lot of noise over the microphone.
I don't know.
Hold on. Sounds like a keyboard or I don't know.
Okay.
All right.
I think it should be working now.
Okay.
That is already locked up. So to do the death penalty really doesn't make much sense from a moral or an ethical perspective, in my estimation. Joe Biden seemingly agreed.
Yeah.
Well, now take a look at this. This is from Slate. They say Joe Biden's craven death penalty reversal in the Boston bomber case. So, he said repeatedly on the campaign trail he's going to get rid of the federal use of the death penalty. Not only did he not do that, he filed a brief with the Supreme Court trying to bring back the death penalty for the Boston bomber, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev.
And to that, I can only say, based Joe Biden. Good for him for pursuing that case. I was really, really worried that he would drop the death penalty against Tsarnaev.
I'm very glad that at least he's re-seeking it.
Yeah, and I am worried about the consequences of that. But I'm worried about him commuting death row in the future. But that was a pleasant surprise to see him pursue the death penalty against Tsarnaev.
However you pronounce his name. Now, I want to be clear about something. What I'm saying here is not a defense of Tsarnaev at all.
Actually, Kyle, it is. What Kyle is doing is trying to argue for Tsarnaev to get his sentence commuted to life. That is de facto a defense of Tsarnaev because he's trying to lessen Tsarnaev's punishment and thereby reduce the severity of the crime.
And the severity of the accountability that comes.
Yeah, he's trying to make sure that Tsarnaev does not face full accountability. And that is a tacit defense of Tsarnaev right there that he's doing. And I know he's going to say like, no, I'm not defending him. He's evil. But he's evil, and like I don't support that. But yeah, it's a tacit defense of Tsarnaev when you're trying to remove the accountability factor or reduce it. So yeah.
I understand. In fact, I have that innate visceral reaction when you see heinous crimes. I definitely feel like, well, that person deserves death. Like, I have that thing that a lot of people have where they see a horrific crime and, there's zero remorse and it's just as vicious as you can imagine. And I think, yeah, that person deserves death. So this isn't a defense of him. But it is to say, Joe Biden fucking lied. He lied on the campaign trail. He said he's against the death penalty. He said he's going to... Which, by the way, is kind of funny. Why would you say you're against it when this is one of the rare issues where the left-wing position actually isn't the popular position? So when you're running for office, if you wanted to...
Self-awareness, Kyle. See, most Democrats now oppose the death penalty. If Joe Biden had doubled down and said, yeah, no, I love the death penalty, which I wish he should have done because that's a correct moral position I think one should take. But he probably did that in order to win over Bernie supporters. Because if he hadn't done that, then they might have just sat out.
Yeah, he shouldn't have tried to do that anyway. He shouldn't have tried to do that anyway. It was just an absolute. That was one of the things that made me have serious reservations about voting for Biden was his state opposition to the death penalty.
Yeah, and I mean, also keep in mind, it's not like the antis are truthful 100% of the time. I mean, Gavin Newsom said that Gavin Newsom's against the death penalty, and he supported a failed California proposition that would have eliminated the death penalty and commuted all the sentences to life without parole. So he was supporting that proposition, and then it failed because even in the probably one of the bluest states in the country, the majority of people there support the death penalty to some degree. So when he ran for governor, he said that he opposed the death penalty, but he would uphold state law and he would respect the will of the people. Not even 3 months into office, he granted a moratorium. He instituted a moratorium and said that under no circumstances would he allow any executions to happen. And he did the typical arguments of bringing up racism, discrimination, arbitrariness, poverty, things that don't really hold up when you look at all the possible explanations for those disparities.
Yeah, and and a lot of the disparities also due to progressive DAs not having blanket policies against seeking the death penalty for any case.
Yeah, and I mean, you also had Governor Hickenlooper, who's now Senator Hickenlooper of Colorado. He said he was going to uphold the law, and he just stopped executions because he didn't want to do them. Same thing for former Governor Kitsaber in Oregon. In fact, there was an inmate who wanted to drop his appeals and be executed, and he received a call from the victim's family saying, "Are you going to let this go through?" And then he just said, "No, we're not doing that."
Yeah, which is weird because he did allow Oregon's only 2 executions to go through. But yeah, if you don't have the stomach to
death penalty, don't
to deal with that. Yeah, don't be governor.
If you are going to deal with and if you are against the death penalty, at least follow state law before you do your own personal beliefs. Case in point, former Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe is against the death penalty. He presided over 3 executions, and he made it very clear that he personally does not support the death penalty, but he said he would uphold state law. Same thing with Governor Tim Kaine, who is also now senator. He personally does not support the death penalty, and he made that very clear when he was running for governor, and he made that very clear while he was governor that he personally does not support the death penalty, but that he would uphold state law, and he did. So for that, I commend them for at least doing their damn jobs, because unfortunately, a lot of West Coast governors aren't really a fan of doing that, even when they are shown to be in the minority, as Gavin Newsom was.
Yeah, and Newsom's abuse of power was just disgusting. I mean, like he said, I'm not going to get involved, and then he just did a complete 180, and shut down the chamber
as he could have, short of commuting death row.
Yeah, well, the only reason I think he didn't commute death row is because he couldn't. In California, the governor can't do that unilaterally.
Yeah.
Which, as much disdain as I have for California, at least that is a good safeguard for their death penalty.
And at least they can't abolish it without the consent of the people. I mean, one of the interesting things is that a lot of these moratoriums happened to be the fault of the antis. Like in California, they basically blocked any efforts to resume executions, and then are now saying we haven't done an execution for so long, what's the point anyway? Well, bitch, guess what? You fucking stalled it, so you're just trying to play the game of why are you hitting yourself. And I can see through it. Both of us can see through this bullshit. And I wish other people could too. And I hope other people can too.
Yeah. I mean, I hope that their momentum dies out someday.
Appeal to the crowd more and you were going to lie. You could have said, I'm for it. And then when you're elected, you could be against it. That would be a better flip-flop.
Oh, now you're in favor of politicians lying on the campaign trail. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, only when they lie and only when they're flip-flopping favors your position, Kyle. Didn't he just criticize Biden for supposedly lying on the campaign trail when he said he opposed the death penalty? Now he's saying he wished that he'd done the opposite. Like this guy has no principles.
But he ran on the unpopular position, which was seemingly a bold stance to say, I'm against the death penalty, because that's not what the majority of Americans. And then he flipped to being for it, which again is the more popular position. It makes no sense politically. It makes no sense in any way, shape, or form. But he fucking lied. He just flat out lied. Oh, I'm against it. Oh, I'm going to get rid of it. And then he's not even taking like a hands-off approach. This is like, I am actively going to try to bring back the death penalty for this guy.
That's actually not true. See,
and God, I fucking wish it was.
The DOJ is the one that files the legal briefs, and
Yeah.
not the president. The president does not hand over a brief and say, "Here to the U.S. Supreme Court, take a look at this." He didn't do that. In fact, Joe Biden's been very clear that he wants a more independent Justice Department that works separately from his office. And Merrick Garland, independently of what Joe Biden wants or wanted, is seeking to put Tsarnaev back on death row, as he should.
Yeah, and also I wish that Biden was as pro-death penalty as Kyle is claiming he is.
I really wish that were the case.
I really wish, like, that would be based. That would be, like, absolutely based. I would have had zero reservations about voting for Biden if he was a pro. As it stands, I don't regret my vote for him, at least not yet. But I did have to deal with the possibility that he would commute death row or would be supportive of abolition, which he still stated that he is. And given the fact that the Justice Department just ordered a moratorium on federal executions, I think that's a signal that Biden is legitimately an anti now. But yeah, Kyle, it's interesting that Kyle's view of people he doesn't like actually makes them sound more based. Like he said that Biden was hawkish and pro-death penalty. I wish.
I feel like this is the perfect microcosm of Joe Biden, the politician. It really is. It's especially this most recent campaign where, to give you another example, he ran on the public option for healthcare. Now, I wish he was running on Medicare for all. I think it's inexcusable that he's not running on Medicare for all, but he ran on the public option. And as soon as he got elected, that totally dropped from his agenda.
Yeah, it's almost like the president doesn't control what the legislature decides to take up for a vote. I mean, it's almost like the legislature acts independently of the president until the bill actually comes to his desk.
He pivoted to people like Kyle. Because if he didn't, they wouldn't have voted for Biden at all.
Kyle didn't vote for Biden either, but, you know.
Okay, well, I mean.
But yeah, but a lot of progressives did. But yeah, Biden was actively appealing to them. In fact, I think his stated opposition to the death penalty was an attempt to appeal to people like Kyle. I think that's appealing to the wrong base, but, you know, I think it was an appeal regardless.
Yeah.
Totally dropped. So it was, let's do a public option to compete with the private sector, and then it became, well, let's just give massive subsidies for Cobra, which is just a giveaway to the for-profit health insurance companies, and let's expand Obamacare more. Well, guess what? You're still going to have tens of millions of people without health care as a result of that. But he ran on the public option, then he backed away from it, and there was almost nobody called him out on it. It's just like...
This is an issue with Kyle. He never stays on topic. Like, he does this all the time.
I didn't notice that, but
yeah.
I'm not a healthcare person, so I really have no real opinion on it.
I know, but that's what I'm saying. Like, he's pivoting to healthcare now on a discussion about the death penalty. So yeah, I mean, I guess we'll wait for him to get past his tangent, see if he comes back.
Let's see if he can wander his way back.
The media was just like,
yeah. Kyle gets lost in his own. Kyle's head is so vacuous that he gets lost in it.
Okay, I guess that's what he's doing. Do you guys have no standards? Do you guys have no principles? Are you incapable of looking at what's happening and then responding to it fairly? And the answer is apparently yes. That's exactly what it is. Because nobody really called him out on it. We're one of very few people who called him out on it. And now, credit to Slate for covering this one in particular. But yes, this is...
Yeah, nobody called him out on on trying to get Tsarnaev back on death row. One, that's not true. I saw a lot of progressives whining about it, to the point where Biden had to release a statement reaffirming his opposition. And two, who would complain, aside from progressive gremlins, about a terrorist going back to death row? Seriously, who?
Libertarians.
Yeah, yeah, libertarians.
But they would come from the angle of, what do you mean I can't own a pressure cooker bomb?
Yeah, yeah, it's a right. Taking away my pressure cooker bomb violates the non-aggression principle.
Yeah.
It's my right to, have pressure cooker bomb, make pressure cooker bomb, and sell them to the highest bidder. But yeah, again, like, I think it's ridiculous that anyone complained over Biden trying to get Tsarnaev back on death row. Nobody should have a problem with that, and the fact that people do is really a sad indictment of
their lack of morality.
Yeah, yeah,
definitely. Joe Biden in a nutshell here. He's said one thing on the campaign trail that was nominally more left, and then now he's elected, and he's going hard right. In fact, they go on.
I wish, Kyle. I fucking wish.
I love these people who, like to portray themselves as centrist, even though that's not really true.
No, yeah.
They just keep moving the left more left, and then they call themselves centrists.
Yeah, and the death penalty isn't even that right wing.
Bernie Sanders, even if you're like a hair to the right of Bernie Sanders, you're fucking far right.
Oh yeah, you're a Nazi, and you're a Nazi and you support genociding poor people.
Yeah.
Yeah. But also, support for the death penalty, it is traditionally more right wing, but I've seen support across the political spectrum for it. I've seen extreme left, people on the extreme left want it, and I've seen people on the extreme right want it, and then there are people like me who are center left who support it, and I've always supported it. Even when I was more left wing, I supported the death penalty.
On to say in this article, get this. His position now on this issue is the exact same as the Trump administration.
I wish.
God, I fucking wish.
I fucking wish.
Also, no.
That would make Biden even more based.
Yeah. I would. How can you possibly see the Trump administration, the Biden administration as the same here? Biden just put a moratorium on executions. Now, to Kyle's credit, this video came out before the moratorium was announced, but he'd been indicating that he was going to do stuff like that. So I still can't give Kyle the benefit of the doubt. I mean, I voted for Biden knowing that he was an anti, and the only reason I voted for him was because I just couldn't stand the other option. I think Trump was so actively harmful to democracy and to our standing in the world.
Inmates, but
yeah. So I basically had to hold my nose and vote for Biden. And if Biden was as pro death penalty as Kyle is acting that like he is, I would have had no problem voting for him. I would have committed voter fraud to vote for him. And yes, Tucker Carlson, you can take that clip out of context and use it. I won't charge royalties.
Because the Trump administration apparently tried to do the same thing. Reinstate the death penalty for this guy.
Yeah, based.
No difference on this particular issue between Biden and Trump. I wonder what went on behind the scenes. I wonder what explanation he would give.
Here's a thought. Who's this Tsarnaev guy? He killed 3 people. Okay, yep. Let's reinstate the death penalty. Again, why is this difficult for some people to put to reckon? How can you look at Tsarnaev's case and think this guy doesn't deserve the death penalty? I know people who were injured in the bombing that he was involved in. I want to see this. I want to see this guy die.
Yeah, and a lot of people who are typically against the death penalty were just like, okay, no, he needs it.
Yeah. I did see some exceptions. There were, a lot of antis protesting during his trial. But no, I want to see this fucker die. This guy, killed and maimed hundreds of people. And I don't think you should keep your life after you do that. There's no excuse.
So how this happened, why this happened, is it, hey, I just don't want to waste political capital on this unpopular position? But he could have done nothing. Instead, he's actively going in the wrong direction.
Kyle, you and I have very different definitions of what the wrong direction is. Also, if he did nothing, Tsarnaev would have actively been commuted to life. There's a time limit. If
Barr issued a notice that he was going to appeal the decision to overturn his death sentence.
Yeah. That wasn't even Garland's decision. I'm glad Garland did not drop the death penalty against Tsarnaev, which is why I was a little bit taken aback at the moratorium. I guess I'd expected it, but I was hoping that maybe it was just virtue signaling and that Biden wasn't really an anti, but I've kind of had to accept the hard truth that that's what he is.
Was he convinced by a staff member that it's something he couldn't do?
Fuck, I wish.
It's just amazing to me that when you get people who are on the right in office, they are fighters and they crusade for their policies.
God, I wish. Have you seen the pros, what they waste their time on? Death Watch,
Oh, I'm very aware of that. I mean, in South Carolina, they decided to stupidly bring back the fucking firing squad. And we talked about this on our first stream on the death penalty because we reacted to another Kulinski video. And somehow I still retain enough brain cells to do this one. But they decided to bring back the fucking firing squad instead of allowing them to either just make the electric chair mandatory or find a way to protect the identities of drug suppliers so that they could get lethal injection drugs. But no, they went with the angle of must shooty things cool. Let's do that, herder.
Yeah.
Take that.
Yeah, I often wonder how that conversation went down. It's like, okay, we need to reinstate the death penalty. And some guys are like, oh, how about firing squad? It's like, well, why? It's like, well, shooty things make pew-pew. Okay, yep, that makes sense. I mean, I wish the pros were as vociferous as Kyle paints them to be. A lot of Kyle's accusations sound like I wish they were true.
Yeah.
I wish I had such an. I know he's viewing it as a bad thing, but I wish I could view pros the same way.
Convince antis to be for the death penalty, like he's saying Biden is.
Yeah, I mean, I've tried so many times to convince antis. A lot of my friends are antis, but I've been unsuccessful.
You get people on the left, and they're compromisers, and they give the Republicans half of what they want, if not more.
Oh, God, I wish.
And so you don't actually get any...
Yeah. Remember they did the bait and switch with Connecticut?
Yep. They were just like, we'll just abolish it for like people after 2012. And then their Supreme Court was like, no, we're going to abolish it for everyone, even though it's currently on death row.
Yeah, it was a bait
and switch. With New Mexico.
And Colorado.
Well, yeah.
And I'm surprised they didn't try that in Virginia. Oh God, I said the word. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that thing would take effect. No, the Virginia bill. I can say that because I unfortunately live here. I have the Virginia pass. You don't.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But basically, no. Virginia's bill took effect for everyone, including those currently on death row.
Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't try to make it retroactive, or try to like appeal the pros by making it.
Under no circumstances would Kuhnman, also known as Ralph Northam, have allowed an execution to happen. Under no circumstances would he have done that.
He's now become my least favorite governor. Well, next to Newsom.
But what about Polis?
I don't know why. I can't seem to hate Polis that much. I want to hate him, but I feel like I don't like him.
DeWine. I fucking hate DeWine.
Yeah, he screwed up the death penalty so much, and without any purpose or reason.
Yeah, like honestly, I'm not surprised with Northam. I was absolutely shocked that DeWine just decided to block executions in Ohio because he said it was over the lethal injection drugs, yet he was Attorney General when there was that problematic execution in 2014, and he was the Attorney General who filed and ordered the briefs to allow them to keep using that protocol.
I don't know. It was like
cleared state and federal courts.
Yeah, he belongs in a nursing home, not the governor's mansion.
Yeah, well, I mean, so does Biden, but
yeah. What nursing home, Jack? Yeah.
Real left representation. When was the last time you heard any politician really make a strong affirmative case against the death penalty?
Basically
look
anytime
at every state
anyone
that no longer has a death penalty.
Yeah. I mean, look at the rate of abolition. It's because the antis are very vocal and the pros are inept.
Yeah.
I've seen so many politicians come out against the death penalty, and it's very depressing.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not really that high, unfortunately, in terms of priorities, because Republicans are focusing on the wrong things. They're focusing on things like critical race theory or
abortion,
stuff like abortion, or even still stuff like gay marriage or cancel culture,
voter fraud, and
things that they've already had their asses handed to them on a silver platter, and they're continuing to try to fight that.
Yeah,
and are still continuing to lose.
Yeah, I mean, like there was one pro in Massachusetts who recently introduced a bill to curtail abortion. It's like, yeah, that bill had like a zero. That no way that bill even
have
gets
those people there. I've never been to Massachusetts, and quite frankly, I don't want to. Like,
no, stay out of here. I mean,
But like, you guys have those type of people up there.
Yeah,
they're like Massachusetts. I mean, fucking Biden won every county there.
Like, yeah, they're rare, but they turn up every now and then. I don't know. I don't think this guy is. I don't think he's in this legislature anymore. But this is a few years because this is a few years back. But he introduced a bill to curtail abortion, and it got like no sponsors, not even a hearing.
Not even. Wait, did any other Republicans sponsor it, or were
no?
they, like,
it was just him. Stupid? Like nobody else got. It's like, why did you waste your time on that? These people have no perception.
They know damn well that if they try to do that, they would get knocked the fuck down.
Yeah. It's just, it's insane how, like...
I don't understand how you can live there. Like, I under no circumstances would live in Massachusetts, or quite frankly, any state without the death penalty. And as soon as I'm done with my undergrad here in Virginia, I'm getting the fuck out.
Yeah, abandon it. When I become president, or God Emperor of the Earth, my first act will be to eliminate Virginia,
or force the death penalty back.
Yeah. Well, I don't even think they can be redeemed that way. I mean, the infection just has to be has to be eradicated.
Amputated, yeah.
Yep.
I don't know if I've ever heard it. Have you? I don't know if I've ever heard it.
Unfortunately,
this is something we've talked about on.
Somehow, I still have the brain cells to tell him, "Fuck yes, I've heard people use those stupid arguments, and I hate them every fucking time. And somehow they still work when they're generally full of shit."
Yeah, like I've heard
pro-life arguments.
Yeah. Like I know the anti-state will like, oh no, you haven't heard me. You haven't heard, the arguments against. It's like, yes, I have. I've listened to countless hours of their excuse making and their false equivalencies. I am thoroughly unimpressed, unmoved, and unconvinced.
Yeah.
This show, but the thing that really changed my mind was that study that came out, which said about 4% of people on death row are completely innocent. They've committed no crime.
And 96% are guilty. Also, that study is a little misleading. If you look at the number, because there have been zero posthumous exonerations of inmates executed post Furman. Now, it doesn't mean that there were no innocent executions. I think that there are 2 that I'm convinced were wrongful.
But do you know what we've also found out, or what we've also had to deal with since 1976? We've dealt with, I think, something like 80 murderers who were executed who previously had convictions for other murders, and they either were released on parole and then they murdered again, they committed murders while in prison, they escaped and murdered again, or they ordered murders while they were serving a prison sentence for murder. How many people have those murdered? Over 180. That is greater than even the most generous number estimate of innocent people who've been executed since 1976.
That's more than exonerations of people who are still alive from death row.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think so. I mean, like you have somebody like Mark Hopkinson who was ordering murders from Wyoming, from 2 states away. He was incarcerated in California. He ordered a murder in Wyoming. What are you going to do? He was already in prison. How are you going to stop
this guy? With Clarence Ray Allen also, and someone like Robert Gleason, who was in Virginia. He was serving a life sentence for murder. Then he murdered 2 other inmates, and he was in Supermax prison at that time. What else are you going to do? Give him another life sentence in Supermax? Oh, I'm sure that'll teach him something.
Yeah.
If someone's in prison and if someone is serving a prison sentence for murder and they commit another murder, not executing them is literally the equivalent of not punishing them at all.
Yeah.
I mean, what gives you the belief that they're going to stop? I mean, they've demonstrated that they are going to continue killing even while behind bars. And if you think that we should not even execute them, then any murder that they continue to commit should be on your conscience forever.
Yeah. There've been I think recidivist murderers are really they come the closest to where I would want like a mandatory death penalty. Yeah. Because I really can't see another way of punishing them. They've already proven that they're extremely dangerous, and
even the way the law hasn't stopped them. So
yeah,
what other than the death penalty will?
Yeah, like Mark Hopkinson, for instance, he hasn't ordered a single murder since January 22nd, 1992, and there's only one reason: it's because he was executed. And you can't order murders when you're dead.
Yeah.
4%. 4%. That means 4 out of every 100 people who are killed by the state
are
totally innocent. And so they are.
Kyle, you're fucking wrong as always. That's actually not what the study said. It referred to 4.1% of people who are currently on death row right now at this very moment are possibly innocent. It doesn't say anything about those who've been executed. I hate when people fucking misunderstand this study. I see it all the time on Twitter.
Oh yeah.
It is so fucking annoying. And when you ask them, where'd you get your source? And they point to this study, and the study says that 4% of people who are currently on death row alive right now are possibly innocent. It doesn't say anything about those who've been executed.
Yeah, and like there have been, what is it, 1,530 executions post Furman.
Yeah.
I think at most there's around 20 whose instances and whose guilt is in question, and of those, I'm only convinced of 2. And 2 out of like 1,530 is less than 1%. Also, I find it interesting that the death penalty seems to be the only thing that these that the antis think has to be completely infallible, like or error proof, when their alternative of life without parole does not have a 100% effectiveness.
Of course, they'll say, well, at least you can free them. Well, guess what? You know those appeals that have helped get 100-something innocent people off death row alive? Those things don't exist for life sentences. Because for death penalty cases, there are 3 rounds of appeal. The direct appeal, state habeas appeal, and the federal habeas appeal. Inmates who are serving life sentences don't get all 3 rounds. In fact, they're lucky if they even get a direct appeal. So if you're serving a life sentence without parole and you're innocent, the biggest chance of you getting out of prison is in a coffin.
Yeah. And there have been many cases
of that. And you're innocent, the likelihood of you being executed is very, 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 very low. It's lower probably than the chances of an innocent person serving life without parole getting out.
Yeah, and there have been actual cases where people who have died while serving life in prison were later found out to be innocent. They've been exonerated, officially exonerated. That has not been the case with executions, or at least post Furman. That's another distinction that a lot of antis fail to make, is the death penalty pre-Furman and post-Furman.
Yeah, they act like we're still lynching black people from trees, which we don't do anymore.
No.
And any attempts to make an equivalency argument about how that's supposedly happening now is just completely offensive and just fucking stupid.
It's insulting to victims of
lynching. Anyone who uses that argument, I automatically don't care what they have to say and I'll take them seriously, period. If anyone says that the death penalty is state-sanctioned lynching, as it currently is done now, I don't care what you have to say, period.
Yeah. It's not only is it just wrong, it's insulting to victims of lynching.
Also, lynching is a capital offense.
Yeah. Henry Hayes, a member of the Klan, was executed for lynching. And then you had the 2 cases then you had the case in Texas, the lynching of James Byrd. The 2 of the 3 defendants were executed. The 3rd one is serving life. Lynching is a crime punishable by death now.
Yeah.
Are murdered by the state with our tax money. See, what that tells me is, even if you have that initial reaction of like, yeah, that person deserves death for that terrible crime or whatever, still doesn't make sense to be for the death penalty, because what you're saying is murder's okay if it's 4% of the time.
To the contrary, Kyle, it's not a blanket package when it comes to the death penalty. Our justice system is designed to look at each case individually. If there are problems with innocence, those will most likely be raised on appeal. And Tsarnaev is not claiming innocence.
Yeah. Also, I vehemently disagree with the argument that most people who are on death row should not be there. I vehemently disagree with that argument. I ardently disagree with that argument, but I can see why they're making that. There is no argument at all, either morally or ethically, that justifies not giving the death penalty to recidivist murderers. At the very basic level, that should be punishable by death, and there's no argument that can be made against that.
Yeah, I have not found a satisfactory answer from antis when it comes to recidivist murderers.
In fact, because they can't have any, because either they pretend like that doesn't exist, or they just like to blame literally everyone but the inmates themselves. They point to the argument of, oh well, most inmates don't do that. Well, guess what? That's not really because
most inmates aren't innocent
when they're not to. If an inmate really, really, really is so determined to do it, they will do it no matter what. And at that point, you have 2 choices: either you execute them and save countless lives from being murdered by that inmate, or you just look the other way and wait for them to keep dropping bodies and continuously do nothing. And that is just as bad as executing an innocent person.
Oh, yeah. Happened with Gaskins in South Carolina. Happened with Clarence Ray Allen, who was serving life when he ordered those murders. Had they been executed for those initial murders, a lot of people would still be alive.
Same thing with Kenneth McDuff down in Texas. He was sentenced to death for triple murder, and he got commuted, and then he got paroled, and then he murdered at least 9 women. If he had been executed for the original 3 murders he had committed, at least 9 women would still be alive.
Yeah. I don't see the antis bringing that up.
I can't live with that, especially because we're funding it. It's our money that's killing them. When was the last time you heard a politician just say that very basic thing I just said?
All the time, and they're just as wrong as you are.
Where you don't even have to defend the criminals or the crimes in order to make that case. That case is a very big picture, macro level case as to what you're signing up for if you agree to the death penalty. I've never heard a politician make that argument. I don't think I ever have. How pathetic is that? Nobody's making left-wing arguments. And so here's Joe Biden saying,
I so wish that were true.
Yeah. Kyle lives in a fantasy land that I wish I could be in.
I know, right? I know.
Something on the campaign trail, doing the complete opposite. And again, only Slate called him out. I haven't seen anybody else call him out. Just a complete and utter flip-flop, a complete reversal.
Have you seen Twitter? Have you seen death penalty opponents on Twitter?
Yeah, they had a epileptic fit over this. Ayanna Pressley
they started glitching and just shitting their pants, bursting into flames, and spontaneously combusting.
Yeah, Robert Dunham.
Very entertaining and also very upsetting that these people really are this delusional. I feel bad for them.
Yeah, Robert Dunham, the supposedly neutral head of Death Penalty Information Center, he had a
which, by the way, is just borderline propaganda. I'm just putting that out there. They're about as neutral as we are.
Yeah. He had a fit. He had an absolute fit on Twitter. Like he shit himself so hard that he reached escape velocity. Yeah. I mean, this guy was just inconsolable over the fact that that the Justice Department under Biden was still seeking death for Tsarnaev. I wish there were more pro-death penalty voices. I wish I lived in Kyle's, fantasy land where the death penalty has widespread support and its opponents.
I mean, it does.
It's
just that.
Yeah.
I mean, it does. I mean, there was a poll that was released that said that apparently support for the death penalty is going up slightly. And another thing is that when there's been correlation on support for the death penalty and rising murder rates, where if you look at the murder rates in the 90s, which were through the roof, you saw a lot of support for the death penalty there. Yeah. In fact, during the late 90s, I think 75% of Americans supported the death penalty, which I mean, I don't know how accurate that is now, because the way that these questions about how many people support the death penalty are asked is just in a way that I think they know very well that they're just trying to make it look smaller. Because the way that polls on the death penalty are asked is typically something along the lines of, what is your preferred punishment for someone convicted of murder? And then you have the option death, life without parole, life with parole, or like something else. But the problem is that not all murders are the same. And if the polls were asked in a different way, for example, either what punishment should someone who murders a child or murders multiple people get? Or if the question were asked, is there any murder case or any circumstance of murder where you would support the death penalty? Yes or no? I guarantee you support for the death penalty is going to look a lot higher, because it probably is. But unfortunately, a lot of these outlets like to stupidly either knowingly or negligently ask the question in a way that it would make the amount of support for the death penalty lower than it actually is.
Yeah, they asked very misleading. Like, I think if you like ask people about like specific cases, I think a problem is a lot of people who oppose the death penalty aren't the kind of blanket antis that aren't the same kind of blanket. Like I remember I knew some people who said like, oh yeah, I would support for Charles Manson or someone like that, but I wouldn't support for any other case. It's like, well, then you're not an anti. You either support it for some cases or you oppose it in all cases.
I'm trying to find there was an article I found. There was a poll that was done for the death penalty in North Carolina. I'm trying to find it. Here we go. So there was a poll done in 2015 by High Point University, North Carolina, and it was asked. The question that was asked was, thinking in general about your views on the death penalty, are there any crimes for which you believe people should receive the death penalty? The results were 72% said yes, 24% said no, and 4% either didn't know or refused to answer.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if they word the poll more honestly or less misleading manner, I think you would see an increase in support.
Yeah, like ask the like if you're gonna do a poll on the death penalty, ask it like that, and I guarantee you it's gonna be higher than what the usual polls are asking.
Yeah.
No explanation, no nothing. I said this, I'm gonna do this. And by the way, when they ever do discuss these sorts of things, they say, oh, it's a pivot. A pivot. A pivot.
A pivot.
They make it sound like an exercise.
Yep.
Or a move in some sporting event. I pivoted. That's a way to clean up what it really is, which was a lie.
I wish. I really do. I really, really do. I wish that Biden would walk back on his promise to abolish the federal death penalty. It's also worth mentioning. Early in the video, Kyle said Biden should have. Kyle is not opposed to Biden lying. He's upset that Biden lied in the way he wanted. Because Kyle just said that Biden should have lied and said he supported it, and then backtracked. So Kyle's not.
Biden had said the commutation thing differently, where he had said, "Okay, let's commute death sentences to LWOP, which is typically the acronym for life without parole, but the acronym would actually be let's whip out pentobarbital. That would be great. We're commuting the sentences to LWOP, as in let's whip out pentobarbital."
Yeah, and then when they apply for clemency, they don't get it because they didn't vote for Biden, so they ain't black.
Yeah.
And they do this all the time. In the primary, I said this, and in the general election, I said the opposite. I evolved. I pivoted. If the media did their job, they would say, so you lie.
Yep, blame the media. Another typical Kyle trope. The media is. I saw their coverage of the federal executions under Trump. It was overwhelmingly negative.
It made my eyes bleed.
Yeah.
One thing, and now you're saying the opposite. You're a liar. But they've just grandfathered in that this is what politicians do. Well, maybe this is one of the reasons why people despise politicians. Unbelievable, man. It's totally flipped. I'm against the death penalty, for my religious beliefs, and it's not okay, and the state shouldn't be involved in this sort of business. And then as soon as he gets in power, not only am I not against it, I'm actively going to try to bring it back for the Boston bomber. Again, this is to say nothing about the Boston bomber at all.
Yes, it is, Kyle. Again, when you say that you want his death sentence commuted, you want him to be held less accountable for his actions. That is a tacit defense of Tsarnaev.
But it is to say, Joe Biden's a fucking liar. And he lies nonstop. And we all know that when it comes to Trump, they called out the lies 24/7, sometimes perfectly legitimately. Sometimes they nitpicked and were silly. But you're supposed to call out the lies of a politician. With Biden, only Slate did it on this one. I haven't seen anybody else do it. So, how pathetic is that? You have to come to this YouTube show to get this very clear flip-flop and reversal from Joe Biden.
Yes, how pathetic it is to seek the death penalty for a terrorist. No, Kyle, what's really pathetic is that
child murdering terrorist.
Yeah. What's pathetic, Kyle, is that you're wasting time and energy defending this piece of shit.
There are better hills to die on than
anything. Shoveling manure is a more honorable and worthwhile job than defending.
I have more respect for flat earthers than I do for people who defend pieces of shit like Tsarnaev.
Yeah, because it defies logic. Why would you want him to get a lesser? There is no argument. You can't redeem somebody like that,
you can't redeem someone like that.
Yeah, you shouldn't, and you can't, and you can't claim he's innocent. He's not even claiming he's innocent. It's beyond obvious that he's guilty. There is no reason to spare Tsarnaev's life.
This is the epitome of an airtight case.
Yes.
So if you want to argue innocence, argue it in a case where it's lacking that. And this case is anything but lacking that.
Yeah. You would be hard-pressed to find a case where there's more evidence against a defendant than this one. Literally caught on tape putting a bomb there.
That says a lot, not about how good we are, but about how terrible mainstream media is.
And that's the video. Oh, boy.
It was a surprisingly short video, which I'm glad.
It was, yeah. I mean, a good portion of the video, he didn't stay on topic. Yeah, so I think that's one reason. But yeah, I think this shows that if anything, Kyle has just gotten worse when it comes to the death penalty. Just completely again.
I really didn't listen to Kyle Kulinski. I
tuned it out. Yeah.
I'm aware that he exists. I was aware that he existed for a while. I just didn't listen to him.
Yeah, I used to be a big fan of his, but that's since changed because he's really revealed himself.
Like this.
Yeah. I mean, in the past, he wasn't even really much an anti. He was more one of the ones that didn't really care. But now he's shilling for murderers at home. He's shilling for murderers abroad too. I think that kind of shows what kind of a person he's become. And all I can say is this is yet another example of progressives choosing the worst battles to fight. There are an infinite number of hills more that would be better to die on. This is not a fight that anyone should want to take part in. Saving people like Tsarnaev from their richly deserved punishment.
It's the equivalent of coddling feces.
Yeah, it is. Tsarnaev there's his life literally there is no reason to keep him alive. He murdered. His bomb murdered 2 people and maimed countless others. One of those who died was an 8-year-old kid.
In total, the Boston Marathon bombings left.
Yeah. 3 dead. 260 people.
Well, technically, the whole episode left 5 dead.
Yeah.
Because he had the officer Collier who got gunned down, and then one of the
Simmons
in the raid died a couple years later from injuries from that.
Yeah. I remember that incident. There were the bombing, but that case actually stuck really close to home. I was born in Boston and I live near Boston. And I know people who were affected by that bombing. One of my classmates, her dad lost part of his leg because of the bomb. I don't know which bomb it was, whether it was the Tamerlan's or Johar's, but yeah, these people struck. They targeted our city's most famous event, and
But the reason why Tsarnaev's death sentence was thrown out absolutely blew my fucking mind, because he basically argued that he could not have been given a fair trial because of the amount of publicity. Well, yeah, no shit. If you bombed the most watched marathon on Earth, where millions of people around the planet are watching, where there are thousands of reporters and dozens and dozens and dozens of cameras, and you decide to place a bomb there and blow up that bomb, no shit, there's going to be a lot of coverage about that. That's exactly why these terrorists fucking do these things in public.
Also, I think it's pretty obvious that the first circus, as I will now call them, the first circus court, throughout his death sentence, was because they were anti-death penalty. If the claim that he couldn't have gotten a fair trial held any merit, they would have thrown out his conviction as well. But they didn't. They only threw out his death sentence. And that, to
me, the eastern part of Massachusetts is the most liberal part, typically, right?
Yeah, extremely.
So even in the most liberal part of the fucking state, they gave him the death penalty. If they moved the trial west to the west part of the state, and again, I haven't been to Massachusetts, and again, I don't plan on that, but I mean, that part's like less liberal, right?
Generally, the Springfield area gets kind of conservative, but the state generally goes. Every county has gone blue, I think, since
every county voted for Biden in 2020, and I think in 2016 they all voted for Clinton. I
think the last time any county went Republican during a presidential election was in like 92,
and that would have been like by small margins.
Yeah, it was. Massachusetts as a whole has not gone red since 1984.
I think it's probably the second most liberal or third most liberal state, because I think Hawaii's number one most liberal.
Yeah.
And then I think it's Vermont and then Massachusetts.
Even Vermont has like some red counties, but yeah. But yeah, it's extremely liberal here, and that's actually why I was doubtful that Tsarnaev would get death.
I felt like he was going to get the death penalty for at least one of those counts, because of the 33 he was charged with, 17 carried death, and I think for at least one of them he was going to get the death penalty. And fortunately, I was right. But back to my point: if they gave him the death penalty in the most liberal part of the state, he sure shit would have gotten it in a more western part of the state.
Yeah. He absolutely would have. I think what kind of sealed the deal was when they showed the trousers that Martin Richard, the 8-year-old, had been wearing, and the jury began to cry. I think that was when that was kind of when I kind of knew that he was going to get death.
Yeah, because I mean, they did the voir dire from of jurors who were from the Boston area, right?
Yeah, they did.
Okay, so then they chose the jurors from the most liberal area of the state, the most liberal like metropolitan area of the state. So, and if they'd given him the death penalty, which they did, then no fucking shit, another area in Massachusetts, if the jury had been voir dired from there, they would have voted the same way.
Yeah, they would. Yeah, he would have. Yeah, he would have gotten death anywhere. I'm a little concerned that if I think the Supreme Court will probably reinstate his sentence.
Yeah, and then that will mark the halfway point of his appeals, because for federal death row inmates, they have two stages. They have the direct appeal, and then they have the what's called a 2255, which is the federal habeas.
Yeah,
and the average time that a federal death row inmate spends on death row is around 16 years. That was the average before the federal executions resumed under Trump. I think the average was around 6 to 7 years as the average, but
McVeigh was the shortest. He spent a little under 4 years. I
actually have the total because I've kept track on the average appeals process. So McVeigh spent almost exactly 4 years on death row.
Yeah, like a matter of days.
Then you had Juan Garza. He spent about 7.9 years on death row. Then Lewis Jones spent 7.4. Daniel Lewis Lee spent just over 21 years. Wesley Perkey spent around 16.7 years. Dustin Honkin spent 15.7 years. Lesmond Mitchell spent almost 17 years. Keith Nelson spent 18.8 years on death row. William LaCroix spent 16 and a half years. Christopher Villalba spent 20.3 years. Orlando Hall spent just over 25 years. Brandon Bernard spent 20 and a half years. Alfred Bourgeois spent 16.65 years on federal death row.
16.65 years too long.
Yeah. Lisa Montgomery spent 13.2 years on federal death row. Corey Johnson spent almost 28, and then Dustin Hicks spent just over 20 years on death row. So the average death row wait for the federal government is about 16.8 years.
Yeah.
And a lot of the reason why these stays are this long was because most of the inmates who were executed under the Trump administration had exhausted their appeals, some as far as a decade before.
Yeah, long before Trump was even in office.
Long before he even said he was going to run. I mean,
yeah.
There was, I think, one inmate who ran out of appeals when George W. Bush was still in office, and that was, I think it might have been either Orlando Hall or Corey Johnson. Their appeals were denied before Obama was even president. So
it was Orlando Hall because they set a date for him in 2008.
No, that was his co-defendant. That was.
Oh, that was okay. But
no, Corey Johnson was denied in I think 05 or 06. They stayed his execution over the drug issue, which then continued until Barr fixed it.
Yeah. All right, so that's it for the video. I mean, if you want to make like a closing statement or something, and then we'll end the stream. It's a shorter one, but
yeah, I don't really have anything else to say.
Yeah. This is a shorter stream, but I never pass up the opportunity to call out Kyle Kulinski whenever he makes a stupid video.
Whenever he talks or breathes.
Yeah. And so, tonight was no different. I guess, I think we'll do this again. I mean, I'm sure Kyle's going to mention something again. He hasn't commented on the moratorium yet, but I wonder if he will in the future. And when he does, I'll be here to call him out for that. So, all right. Thank you for joining Death Watch. Thank you to everyone who tuned in, and peace out.